Here we go. All right, kiddos. Welcome to the Seraphine podcast. I'm Seraphine Arocha, and today my guest is not only a friend now, she started out as somebody who helped me with my clothing to get it snatched and fitted on my body. She is a fashion designer here in Kansas City. Her name is Nataliya Meyer. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
I am so happy that you're here, especially now, because I feel like every time I've seen you, I forgot what you look like.
With a mask on, for sure.
I mean, the thing that's so crazy about what you do, so we can give you a little backstory. So before we dive in, how I first met Nataliya, she was out and about, and she was actually, you were at Monarch Bar.
Yeah, at Noel's place.
At Noel's. And Noel introduced me to you, and I remember thinking, like, who is this woman? And then I
thought the same thing about you.
I love it.
Because you were so beautiful.
And I felt the same way. It was like we also had that vibe.
I got to get to know this person.
Totally.
Yeah,
similar vibes.
Yeah.
So I remember coming up to you, and then you told me about your storefront, and I was somebody at the time who I really got into about 5 or 6 years ago, tailoring my clothes to my body. Instead of just buying it off the rack, I was like, you know what? I can make cheaper clothes look more expensive, and who better to go to than somebody who is a designer and who is willing to take in your clothes. So I went to your storefront, which is Lucia Sarto, and that is right in back of the Fontaine, correct?
Yes, the Fontaine, right behind the Palsinelli building, just west of the plaza.
So how long have you been at that space?
It's about 6 years.
It's
been a minute. It's like forever and nothing at all.
Yeah.
It just depends on my mood.
Yeah.
It's like as if I know everything and I know nothing.
Yeah.
In one.
So I want to know, so you have got obviously a really sexy accent, and where is it from? What's your heritage background?
So I was born in Ukraine, so I speak Russian and Ukrainian. My prior language was Russian for 20 years. And then I moved to the United States when I was 20, and actually a year right after 9/11. That's how I kind of always remember, and it was just still very fresh. Even back in Ukraine, it's huge news, right?
Yeah.
And it was just actually like right a year, so it was an anniversary as well of the awful thing.
Yeah.
So I moved from Ukraine. I've always loved sewing, and I studied sewing there. In Ukraine, as a child that's not super advanced in math or languages, you get an opportunity to get a trade, starting at I think you take your 8th grade in trade school. And I was just one of those kids who liked to hang out, and I drew in my book most of the time. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to do. And I loved fashion, and we didn't have too much money. So I wanted to make something that was like cool. Yeah. And you walk into the stores, which you can never, at that age, especially like 14, you can't afford any, unless your parents are buying. And so you're like, I want to have that jacket or something like that. And so like all these people who were, for some reason, stood in those stores, servicing them, working, somehow were related. I thought, this crowd was cool and super rich and amazing. And so I just want to be like a touch of that world. And so I went to a trade school for learning how to sew, starting at 8th grade, finished my high school there. After I finished about 3 years, it's an equivalent of an associate's degree. And then, so it's like a tailoring degree. So that's everything that has to do with sewing, but just like a beginner. Even though it's 3 years, you have to have a ton of experience to really do. It's like driving. You have to have a lot of driving behind your back.
A lot of hours.
Yes,
I'm sure.
yes.
Yeah.
And even after you do, you still can learn and learn and learn.
Yeah.
And so it's a similar thing in just really any craft.
Yeah.
It takes forever. And then I went to another school that's like a similar trade school, but just to advance my degree, and then like a academy, like a past college, something like that. So there's a whole lot of education compounded, and then I had to move. I didn't finish it. I had to move to United States when my parents have given an opportunity. And so we moved, and I was 21. In here, I just worked as a tailor and kind of conducted my own brand in just having an opportunity to look on the internet and having to walk into fancy stores like halls, and you look inside all these beautiful garments, and you're just exposed to so much, to where you're also learning from just feeling the world as well as getting a formal education.
So I'm curious, as a younger girl who, takes these tests, and did you know right away that it would be fashion, or were you like, oh, this is what the test told me?
So we've never actually taken the vocational test. It's just, school is not going to stay with you if they're just going to be like, you got to go.
Interesting.
So, and they're just not going to spend their time teaching you if they're not seeing that, like being a mathematician in your future, or some teacher or something like that. In my mind was so artistic. I've always known that I loved clothing. Like ever since I was a little kid, like I'll watch a movie about Three Musketeers, which is like one of the really, really popular movies back in Soviet Union, where I'm from, initially. So like in all these elaborate costumes that people have made. And I just remember as a child drawing all these costumes, or Cleopatra, or just any of these characters, and all of a sudden I was spawned into all these costumes that were kind of sexy and anime inspired, and like all this stuff that kept happening in my head. I couldn't vocalize it as in to say this is what I want to be. Back in a crashing Soviet Union, or new up and coming Ukraine, or whatever that was back then, you can't really find that. Like in America, you have all these jobs and all these opportunities, and you can build a ladder. Like I have a 16-year-old, and we're trying to think, okay, what do you want to do? So let's build a ladder down so you can take the steps. And back in Soviet, like I keep saying Soviet Union, it was crashing. So it was done by the time I was going to school, but it was like this dilapidated economy where you couldn't build steps. So you wanted to have
either like here, like top tier, or you've got
big deviation between layers of society. And so we were just trying to like figure out, where am I? Who am I? And as a kid, you just can't make a kid do something.
No.
They're just going to do what they want. And so I just drew all the time, and my friend was going to sew. I thought maybe go into theater or maybe or drawing there was an opportunity to learn how to sew, because there's also lower end jobs that I could get right away. So that would feed me if I had to eat. And so that was kind of, even if it wasn't like a fancy job, it was a great beginning. And so it's given me a lot of opportunities. I worked at an actual factory. Like, that is not an easy thing to do.
No, it's so interesting too, because in fashion, I feel like there's definitely two schools of thought. One is super traditional, like Savile Row, like suit making, tailoring, like Alexander McQueen. He was schooled in this very formal way. And I love that. I'm actually like, half of my favorite Instagrams is looking at men's suiting, because I'm so fascinated by the measurements and the way they fold the material to cut it, and the different way it can shape your body. But then you go a next step, which, why I love Alexander McQueen is he started to get into heavy beading, different textures, even bone. But that's a whole other way of teaching. So I'm so curious, when you started, was there something that you were like, you enjoyed doing more than other things? Was there something you were attracted to? That was like a designer, or was there that moment, that aha moment where you're like, that's my passion, that's where I'm going to go? Because your designs are so unique.
Thank you so much. So I've always loved Jean-Paul Gaultier, and he worked for Dior at the time before he had his racist remarks and had some issue. Oh my God, I just feel like all these people.
I know.
Just one day before I say something.
I know. John Galliano, like all of them had their moments. They really have.
Yeah.
Karl Lagerfeld's pretty bad too. I hate to say it. Love you guys. But redemption
I feel
tour.
like our expectation, we just live in a new world.
Yes.
You have to retrain. And we are, as a humanity, we're just very young.
Yeah.
And we're learning to grow and learning with our children. And we hope the next generation will be smarter than us. And even
better. Yes.
Yeah.
So what was it with Dior? Like, are there any things that pop in your mind immediately? Like, describe the garments.
So this particular magazine that I recall is like a small couture snippets of different people, but his stuff was so wild. He's all these bright colors. They're just so just so different. And I was kind of like a goth kid back in the day, like I black nail polish, leather pants, all these things. And so I felt like a lot of things, like fashion was my language for music. Like that's what I took in that's how I spoke. And so like we used to go to the rock club or whatever club there was back in, the city that I'm from, back in Ukraine. And so every week I'd make myself an outfit. My mom would say, you're not the one performing. So I had to dress up to be like visible. And this is one of the things that I loved. And when I saw his work or any other, like, I just loved the things that were happening, the things you can't see on the street that will change your feeling. And that's one of the things that I really love, is having an opportunity to create that human feeling of, like, it's not just the colors or textures. There's a feeling that comes with it, and that's the most important part.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Gaultier really, he tapped in to his muse Madonna, and I remember the silhouettes of the corsets and the cone bras, and just the way he would place crystals, jewelry, studs on the garment to where the cutouts of women's form were just a little bit, not a little bit, over the top.
Even for now,
I know.
Over the top.
They really
I
are.
am jealous of that world, because back then, or Terry Mugler.
Yes. Oh my God.
Amazing things. We actually saw his exposition in Canada when my husband and I went to visit Montreal. And it just kind of, the stars have aligned. Yeah. And I walked into this Mecca, and none of the people who visited knew that I was a designer, but I knew I was the important one there. Yep. It was me and Terry Mugler.
Yep.
And that was us together, and all these people just came to visit, and it was just...
It's funny that you say that, because there was a McQueen exhibit by one
I automatically feel jealous.
I know, right? It was right here, actually. I went to the big one, the MoMA one, but I actually went to a small one here in Kansas City.
Oh, exciting.
And McQueen had a really good friend. I can't recall his last name, but it's Gary. He's a photographer. And he basically was the photographer for McQueen in the very beginning. And it was so cool to see all these models, and the show in and of itself was in this tiny little, gallery that was downtown. And I remember just asking him questions. He's like, wow, you know a lot about McQueen. And it's that intimate knowledge. And you can't fall in love with fashion unless, I think, you feel an emotion. And for me, that dark broodiness in McQueen,
it's brilliant.
I think I have more skull scarves than I could ever do. I could ever need. And then the shows, were absolutely, to me, they were like an opera to clothing.
Yeah.
I feel like garments. I think about when I eat a really beautiful meal. And
I love food.
I do too. And I love like Persian families and Russian families, Italian families, like when they're all in the kitchen, and that energy that goes into the food, this connectivity. And it's interesting because I feel that energy in your store, in your garments.
Aww.
And I think it's so cool to put on a dress that normally, I remember like the first one you had hanging for me to try on was that beautiful column of black and purple and silver. And it was like as soon as I touched the garment, all the intimidation of how beautiful it was went out the door. And when I slipped into it, it's like you knew which garment to pick for me. And I think that it's so important when people wear clothing that they feel, number one, good in it. And number two, they have fun. There's the art of play. They don't take it too seriously. And that they have the right to change their mind.
Absolutely.
I think it's more fun to just say, you know what, screw it. I'm it's like me cutting bangs, you know, forever I was afraid of it. And I'm like, I'm going to try it. So I want to know, when you started your fashion line, how old were you? And then also, when were you, what did you realize you were really good at first?
I started designing since I started drawing. So this is a silly moment. So we didn't have too much money. So I've always been obsessed about Barbies. On the way to my art school, it's like an extracurricular activity that we've had. There was a Barbie store that I stared in the windows of because I couldn't afford anything. But I drew these paper dolls. And when I was maybe 12, I had hundreds of them. And each one had a set of outfits. And they were beautiful, and some of them were anime and more of like drawn, like whichever way I drew. So I took all the neighborhood children, set them aside around me, and handed up. Okay, you get the tall one, so you get the short one, but then you get this pretty one, and so I've evened it out all around all of them, and they've just went. I really wish I had those collections. That's not. You don't keep this too much paper.
Yeah.
And obviously I've moved, so you one suitcase and you're done. As an immigrant. But I started designing really early without knowing that I was designing. Yeah. So what can you say, my first collections, I mean, when I really started designing, when you say a collection, produced a fashion show, there's a couple of people here in town who do like West 18th Street Fashion Show, Peregrine, and she was the first one that was like, you're good. And I'm just not used to hearing that. I'm not used to saying that. Yeah. So you have to really assume that new world approach to be really evaluate yourself to what you really are, not what your low self-confidence will tell you. And you're like, okay, I'm actually good at this, so let's do something. And I have started doing these crazy gowns. Like we didn't have any money, so I would just cut up a curtain, like genuine, or like my employer had donated a whole bunch of jeans. Yeah. She had a resale shop, and I made this elaborate corseted gown out of old denim with like a gown train. Maybe we'll pull up a photo so you can see it, so people can see. And so started kind of these collections, but they were still very fractioned. So I'm going to use this fabric in this outfit, and that's what will tie it in. But it wasn't as much of a story. It really, every year I learned something new. And I cannot tell you now that, I know everything and I'm all this. Every day I'm like, what should I change? Where can I edit to refine it to be even better? And this is what I'm learning now is, as an artistic brain, I want to do it all. I want to do leather jackets, and I want to do little underwears with tiny little straps. Yeah. And I want to do plus size and minus size and just everything. And I have to slow down and be like, okay, let's just refine what you really need and do it the best you can. Maybe do a little less, but the most amazing, versus just, I bought all this pretty fabric, so let's just use that. Yeah. So I'm just trying to reduce what's in my head to what's the best in my head.
I was on your Instagram and I saw you really drawing again. Yes. And I love that when we are reminded of our younger self and how either we gave it away, we lost it, it isn't quite with us, and we revisit it and go, gosh, it was always with me. So what inspired you going back into the physical drawing?
So I always try to grow as what I do. And, as a fashion designer, you do have to be able to speak CAD. You have to be able to speak drawing. You have to be able to speak actual, tailoring and sewing in, designing. So all these things are combined into this one job. So I'm learning to draw on the computer. So I actually think my drawing in paper is substantially better. Like I'm actually having a really hard time posting the digital drawings because they're crap.
I love you.
Because I'm so used to, I have to love it. Really, and that's why sometimes I don't even post on the Instagram if I don't have fabulous stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love the people who did it. I love the work that we put together. This picture is amazing. I want to be the person on this picture, and then it's going on in the internet. And right now, I just have to hammer it out. And I told myself every night, unless something's I'm so exhausted or I'm doing this right now, and that's why I'm not drawing. But every night this year, I'm planning to keep drawing, and I'm going to read on some tutorials and see. And I don't want to just draw. I want, how you look at different pages and pages and pages of things, and all of a sudden this thing stands out. I want to have that type of feeling when I'm looking at these drawings, and I'm not yet. So that's why I feel like that. But I am still going to work on it for at least a year to see where it's going to take me. And I feel like it will, because I know the basics of drawing. I just am so not used to doing it on the computer. And there's a lot of technical things that you want to do. And so that's kind of where I am. Obviously, it's so much easier because you can replace the color, and all of a sudden the jacket you drew is red or blue or green, and it's changed your whole story. And
it's so curious to me because, kind of answers my next question, so I might add on to it. Because I was going to ask, what do you still need to, what are you still working on that, gets you every time? And a little piggyback off of that is, did you begin pattern making right out the bat? Or were you somebody who, because I know a lot of designers, when they go to school, they get very regimented, or they start to kind of go off the cuff and kind of self-teach them in different ways.
So when you say off the cuff, that's exactly what I was doing. So I do have formal education, but it's not enough. Nobody's sitting there in a trade school or to give you an associate's degree and teaches you couture. That just doesn't happen. So we were taught basic how to sew together a skirt. So our teacher would cut out a set of skirts for the whole class, and we would, based on our sizing, and we would put our skirts together. And then the same thing with jackets. She would be the one cutting it. I didn't have time for this. I needed to do this now. And I have done some terrible mistakes. And then all of a sudden, this mistake has become a decorative brooch or something like that. And I've just never stopped. So I wasn't afraid to cut into this fabric. Wasn't afraid to start. Well, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's going to get cut up, So it's just, I just couldn't stop. And I've always wanted to do these different things, and I love different. So I used complicated patterns. Even I wasn't fazed by making mistakes because that's going to happen. Yeah. But I was formally taught what is formal education for sewing, which allowed me to then elaborate on my crazy complicated choices. Yeah. So that's quite important. But I did it's completely different things than what people are like, oh, let's sew pants. And I'm like, yeah, that's a leather jumpsuit. And so that's nothing like classic pants. And my teacher goes, oh my God.
Oh, that's hilarious. So have you worked with a stylist that has made you see your garments in a new way?
So every single person I work with is doing that. And I am better when I work with other people, just because they will push me to when I'm doing something for me, I'm like, I know there's the best way to do this. It's the easiest way to deliver this look. So that's cool. But when people don't know what I can and can't do, and they'll just say, I want this, and you're going to, try your hardest to follow that, and that turns out really cool. Yeah. And I've been talking to my clients, even through COVID, people have been getting married and stuff like that. We try to be really safe, but this is just something that's left for people now. So they're lost their travel, their restaurants, their movies, their concerts, their festivals. So all that's left is to get married.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I love it too because that sustained us throughout this whole craziness.
Well, it gives you a little light at the end of this really long tunnel.
Oh God.
God.
Yes.
How is your business changed since COVID? What's different about it? Is there anything that you feel like has, oddly enough, gotten better? Or is there parts of it that you're like, no, nothing about COVID has been good?
So I've been telling my husband that I am trying to wear my big girl pants just to really evaluate my spending. Because I have a small store. Well, it's an average size store, but when I keep buying things, I'm buying all these fabrics, it gets really small. And I'm like, I really need to refine what I'm getting, how I'm spending money to avoid unnecessary expenses. So that's something to think about, to really refine. What do you really want? Am I peppering myself a little bit here and there instead of just getting something I absolutely love? And so that's something I would think about. With COVID, you want to make sure you really pay attention to things that are absolutely amazing or you make money. So like it made you really rethink how, I'm not making money on this. If this is not safe, I'm not doing it. Or do I absolutely love these people? Then I'll do it. And that's just kind of cleaned out like the people that really love me and really there for me, or people who are really passionate about their work. And that's really cool. With COVID, we had a huge influx of weddings. I mean, in there, instead of having 6 months to do some kind of like dramatic alteration, we can have 2 weeks or 2 months. It's so much less. So it's a lot more planning on my behalf and a little bit more choreography.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just different because we used to have influx of people bringing one pair of pants and one skirt, and that's how we collected our business versus one pant per
I know, one pant per person. Yeah, right.
One person bringing a whole bunch of clothes.
Yeah.
And then you have to hammer it out as quick as you can.
Yeah.
But it's still income. It's just differently scheduled. So I just really have to pay attention to that. But at the same time, I mean, it still works. I am so lucky. I was terrified what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But we so far retained all our people, and we're just trying our best.
Well, it's because you're excellent in what you do,
And
I
I'm
think
not
that,
alone.
No,
I want you to know, I just can't do it alone. All my team members are fabulous.
How many people are on your team?
We have a total of 8.
Oh wow!
Nobody's
Yeah.
at the store.
Yeah.
It's myself and another lady who work at the store on a daily basis, and all the rest of the people coming in once a week, picking up work, managing, like even manager is at home just helping me with some internet stuff.
Yeah.
We have been really trying to refine what we have and description, number, put it on the internet for sale, just clear out everything. I have so much product. It is swimsuits and pants. It's not even the things you could see in the store because there's so much stuff. I don't have an opportunity to display it all. I've actually been looking into some places to maybe put it up.
Definitely. I mean, I think now's the time to do it, especially because so many stores are closing. And I was just talking to Giovanna and Aaron and Chelsea about the fact that the shopping experience, it's breaking my heart because
It is. Oh my God.
I want to touch garments. I want to see garments. I want to experience them, and I want to see them in real life. And God bless photography. God bless Instagram.
Or internet shopping.
But there is something so wonderful about being in the presence of a garment and putting it on your body. It's
like going to a museum, but you can touch things.
Totally. And it's getting so sad because e-commerce is taking over so much, but it's also presenting a lot of opportunity for people. So brick and mortar, my heart still goes there, but I understand why people have to go to e-commerce. So I guess here's a question for you that I've always wanted to know. When you're making a garment, you invest this time, maybe even blood, sweat, and tears with pricking your fingers and late nights. You're staring at it for a really long time. And then you have to give it away. Is there any garments
yes.
that you gave away that you miss or would love to see someone like shoot a picture and be like, can I see her again?
Yes. And honestly, and you can tell, I love costumes.
Yes.
So the one garment that I probably like the most, well, actually it's three, but they're like one family. So these girls have competed in these equestrian competitions.
Yes.
And they have the most beautiful bedazzled jackets. And so they would bring me a picture of the horse. And especially one girl had a horse that was like creamy brown. And it had like a very light brown streak. It's so pretty. Like, I couldn't believe this color existed on the horse.
Yeah.
It like, or red, creamy red. I can't, I just am not well versed in colors of horses, but that thing was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, what do we make for you to match this beautiful creature? And it was so bedazzled. It was on fire with all the rhinestones. And I mean, it took us forever to make it. And then the mom came back and there's three girls who competed, and each one had a different one. And one was a little bit more like American Indian inspired. Another one was like a little more damask looking. But they were so beautiful and so different. And I just keep thinking about those. And it's just like something, if one day they'll have a show like you saw.
For McQueen.
Exactly. And one day they'll have it for me long after I'm gone, or like when I retire maybe. That should be something in that show, because that's memorable, beautiful pieces.
Isn't it crazy to think that there will be garments in people's families that you've created? And granted, you have a child, so a lot of times our legacy is our child. But there is something really magical to me about garments that have been worn by an ancestor and that tell a story. I mean, the story of the young girls and the equestrian horses. It's going to be told to a granddaughter, a daughter, or, whoever, or maybe, and if they even sell the garment, that there's always like that, there's always that sense of like, who saw it and what story did they tell themselves about the garment? And you're going to be, you'll be forever a legend.
I'm genuinely expecting a museum of me one day. So like, I mean, you've seen the store. That has to go somewhere.
Yes.
And that's where it's going to be.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're wrapping up this portion, but we're gonna have a little. Trust me, we're gonna have a little sideline question, rapid fire back and forth after this. But first of all, I want my viewers, if you liked this episode, please put comments below, questions. I would love to have another episode with you down the line too. So please, if you have any questions, please ask away. If you like this, tap that little bell and subscribe. And
you better.
I know, right? You better. That's the thing that people do not do, is subscribe. So do it. And then with you, please let our audience know where they can find you on social media, and if there is anything that you'd like to have them keep an eye out for.
So, lots of our work is done on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is Lucia's_Sarto. And that's our handle. I can give you the handle.
Yeah, and we'll put it on we'll tag it on the below. And you have an Etsy boutique?
Etsy boutique, and also you can search it, Lucia Sarto, just 2 words. Don't put underscore there. I don't think we have a search there on Etsy. And just on the internet, like luciasarto.com, that double S, don't forget that. And we have a store west of the plaza in Kansas City. That's the most important thing, really.
I have to say, you're the best tailor, seamstress, dressmaker, in my opinion, in Kansas City.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit more later. Again, please subscribe so you can watch the second episode. And thank you for coming on today.